Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that more than 300 years have passed. Not 300 hours, not 300 days, 300 years. The people you knew, the streets you walked, the world outside your door, all belong to another age. But you haven't lived those centuries. The silver coins you carried are still with you, and somehow, you genuinely believe you were asleep for only a day, maybe even less. This isn't science fiction. This is a story Allah tells us in the Qur'an. A group of young believers entered a cave. Allah caused them to sleep, and generations passed before they awakened. But here's the part that makes their story even more powerful. The real mystery isn't just, how did they sleep for centuries? It's, what made them enter that cave in the first place? To understand that, we have to go back. Allah tells us that they were youths, young men who believed in their Lord, and Allah increased them in guidance. Think about that. They weren't introduced to us as kings. They weren't introduced as commanders. They weren't introduced as powerful men with armies behind them. They were young believers, and they were surrounded by people who worshipped others besides Allah. But these young men had reached a point where they could no longer simply follow what everyone around them was doing. Allah strengthened their hearts, and they stood firm. Their declaration was clear. Their Lord was the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and they would not call upon another God besides Him. Look at the courage in that moment, being surrounded by one belief and standing for another, knowing that being different could cost you, knowing that people may turn against you, but refusing to trade truth for acceptance. They looked at what their people worshipped besides Allah and challenged it. Where was the clear proof? Why should something be worshipped without evidence? Their faith wasn't blind imitation. They knew who their Lord was, and they refused to pretend otherwise. Then came the decision. They withdrew from their people and from what their people worshipped besides Allah. And their refuge? Not a palace, not a fortress, not some luxurious hidden home. A cave, cold stone, darkness, isolation, uncertainty. Imagine standing outside that entrance. Behind you, the world you've always known. Ahead of you, darkness. You don't know exactly what happens next, and yet, you step forward. Because sometimes faith means walking away from what feels secure for the sake of what you know is true. And as these young men took refuge, they turned to Allah. They asked their Lord for mercy and for guidance through what they were facing. And there is something beautiful about that dua. They didn't know how Allah would save them. They simply knew who could save them. Then, inside that cave, Allah caused them to sleep. Years passed, and outside, life continued. Days became months, months became years, years became generations. Imagine the sun rising over that mountain again and again and again. Seasons changing, people growing older, children becoming parents, entire generations replacing the ones before them. And inside the cave, silence. The Qur'an gives us an incredible image. As the sun rose, it inclined away from their cave in one direction. As it set, it moved away on the other. They remained in an open space within the cave, and if you had somehow found them, the sight would have terrified you. Allah tells us they looked awake, even though they were asleep. They were turned, right and left, and their dog remained at the entrance, its forelegs stretched out. Now imagine walking into that cave. No voices, no movement you'd understand. Young men who appear awake but are deep in sleep. A dog at the entrance, a place hidden away from the world. The Qur'an says that if you had seen them, you would have turned and fled, filled with fear. For centuries, that cave remained their world. And then, Allah awakened them. Just like that. Eyes opened, awareness returned, And one of the first questions among them was simple: "How long have we been here?" Their answer? Maybe a day, or part of a day. A day, after centuries. Think about how unbelievable that is. From their perspective, it didn't feel like hundreds of years had disappeared. They couldn't tell. So they said what a believer says when his own knowledge reaches its limit. Their Lord knew best how long they had remained. And then, they became concerned with something incredibly normal: food. They needed something to eat. So they chose one of them, gave him their silver coins, and sent him toward the city. But they warned him, "Be careful. Do not let anyone discover you," because in their minds, the danger was still outside. The Qur'an says they feared being stoned, or forced back into their people's religion. So one young man left the cave, carrying money from a world that no longer existed. Imagine being him. You remember the roads, you remember the city, but something feels wrong. The world is familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Eventually, Allah caused their story to become known. Why? So people would know that Allah's promise is true and that there is no doubt about the hour. That changes everything. This was never only a story about sleeping for centuries. It was a sign of resurrection. How can the dead return? How can someone gone for generations be brought back? These young men had been removed from ordinary life for centuries, and then Allah awakened them. To them, it felt like a day, maybe part of a day. Outside the cave, more than 300 years had passed. The one who created us the first time can bring us back again. Then the Qur'an mentions something fascinating. People argued about how many young men there were. Some said 3, with their dog being the 4th. Others said 5, with their dog being the 6th. Others said 7, with their dog being the 8th. But Allah says, "My Lord knows best their number." And that teaches us something. We love mysteries. We want every missing detail: their names, their exact location, their exact number. But the Qur'an does not make those details the point. The real question is not how many were in the cave. It is, why were they there? They were young believers who chose faith when following everyone else would have been easier. They stepped away from false worship. They asked Allah for mercy, and Allah protected them in a way they could never have imagined. And this is where their story becomes personal. Maybe nobody is chasing you into a cave, but every generation feels pressure. Pressure to fit in, pressure to stay quiet, pressure to treat wrong as normal because everyone else does. Sometimes holding on to your faith can make you feel like the strange one. The people of the cave remind us that guidance does not always mean the easiest road. Sometimes it means choosing the harder path because you know it is right. They could not see what Allah had planned. They only knew what they had to do next: believe, stand firm, ask for mercy, and move. There is another part of this story that should make us think. When they woke up, centuries felt like a day, or part of a day. Think about your own life. How fast did the last 5 years go? How many times have we said, "Later. I'll pray properly later. I'll leave that sin later. I'll become serious later." But time keeps moving. One Ramadan becomes another. One year becomes another. And eventually, our time runs out. The Qur'an tells us they remained in the cave for 300 years, adding 9. 309 years. Then Allah reminds us that He knows best how long they remained. The unseen of the heavens and the earth belongs to Him. Maybe that is the part worth remembering most. Those young men entered darkness, but they were not abandoned. They lost the security of the world they knew, but they did not lose Allah. They could not see the future. They simply trusted their Lord and took the next step. Sometimes you will not understand why a door closed, why something was taken away, why your path changed. Not understanding the plan does not mean there is no plan. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, taught that whoever memorizes the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf will be protected from the Dajjal. And near the beginning of that surah, we find these young believers, surrounded by pressure, holding on to faith, walking away from what was false, entering a cave, and trusting Allah with what came next. So when the world makes you feel strange for holding on to what you know is right, remember the people of the cave. The darkness did not mean Allah had abandoned them. The uncertainty did not mean they were lost. And what looked like the end of their world became a sign for generations after them. They entered a cave, they closed their eyes, centuries passed, and when they woke, Allah had turned their story into proof that His promise is true. And Allah knows best.